It was a wild town, way out on the frontier, miles from anywhere, no other town near. Only way to get there was down a long draw, where outlaws and rustlers could hide from the law. Meanest of men, and who ran the place, a fella named Heck, a real ornery case, a big burly guy but smart as a whip. When he was around, no one dared give lip. At a corner table in the local saloon, he would hold court starting round noon, and into the evening, if you wanted anything, seeking his advice or issues you'd bring. He would decide just how the wind blew, who was up or down, and the punishment due. Cowpokes feared him, barmaids gave respect. All other locals paid dues he'd collect. Now, in another valley, wandering down the trail, a lonesome rider was meek, slight, and pale. Headed for the town, didn't carry a sidearm, dressed like a nester, not long off the farm. He chanced to encounter a couple of lugs, spoiling for action were these ugly thugs. As they passed, they roped him round the chest, pulled him to the ground, and drug him for jest. They bound him and tied him up to a tree. Thought he'd be squirming just to get free, but he didn't struggle, call out, or resist, annoying the bullies and made them persist. They pulled out pistols and fired at the guy, but for some reason their shots went awry. Finally they left him strung up in the sun, then rode back to town. They'd had their fun. Late the next morning he walked into town, clothes tattered and torn, matted and brown. Cowpokes were milling around the saloon. Heck was already there just before noon. Heck found his chair and settled in for the day, just as a stranger came through the doorway. He walked to the middle of the crowded hall, cleared his throat, and announced to them all, "I've been roped and pulled from my horse, dragged through the brush and beaten, of course. I've been tied up and then strung to a rail, shot at by cowards and left by the trail. When I got free, I walked through the night, but let me assure I'm not done with this fight. I seek Hector Johnson." Then looking around, "Does anyone know where he can be found?" The place erupted with laughter and calls. Then guns fired shots in the ceiling and walls. Finally Heck raised one hand in the air, and everyone stopped with one cautious stare. "I think I'm the fellow that you're looking for. Tell me what you're after, but you'd better be sure." "I've traveled far along this rugged way because of a promise that I must obey. Your mother Gladys waits at death's door. It's her dying wish that I cannot ignore." Heck asked, "What do you think you're up to?" Stranger replied, "I promised her I'd baptize you." The absurdity of what had been expressed seemed like the most ridiculous request. The stranger stood bold with great confidence, as Heck studied the man's countenance. "I really could have you run out of this place. For coming in here, you're such a disgrace." Heck suddenly burst into a mammoth rage. He fumed and convorted, as if on some stage. He stood and gyrated as he pulled at his hair that sent a chill through all who were there. Get out! Everyone just get out!" he railed, and with venom did shout. Everyone scrambled to head for the door, cowpokes, barmaids, and stragglers galore. When the dust settled, no one was there except for the stranger and Heck in his chair. He had collapsed like a lump in his seat, like a whimpering animal in full retreat. He bowed his head and began to shake. Between laughter and crying, his body did quake. Then he raised his head and looked around, his eyes all red, and there wasn't a sound. "There's not a feller that I can't outsmart, and yet, little man, you've pierced my heart. All my life, for reasons I can't explain, I've been contrary, ornery, and sought easy gain. I know my sweet mother has worried for me, but for some reason I sought to be free." The stranger then said words that were bold. "It's time for you to come back to the fold. It's time for you to change all your ways and be an example for all these strays. The stranger sat down across the table, while Heck protested the best he was able. But the little fellow would not be denied. He countered each manipulation Heck tried. The two faced off and talked through the day and into the night in a calm, patient way. Heck could sense such a spiritual wave from the patience and love the stranger gave. It's hard to express how change comes about, how one person can redirect the trail's route, how prayers of a mother for her wayward son can result in even the toughest undone. When Heck went down in that watery grave, what emerged was a person the stranger did save. The town was transformed over the next decade. Bad folks moved on, while good folks stayed. No one ever knew the stranger's real name, but from that day on he gained great fame. Couldn't find where he came from or went, but most folks agreed he was heaven sent.